Welcome to the All About You podcast. Today I have an author with me, Bryn Pottie, as my guest, and we are talking about his first book, The Great Lunenburglary. Bryn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sheila.
Well, I'm always honoured to have an author on the podcast because it's a labour of love.
Yes, no one was asking me to do this, that's for sure.
My first question, Bryn, do you have a background in writing?
Yes, I'm based out of Canada. I'm currently based in Nova Scotia, which is like the smallest and one of the more rural, kind of poorer areas of the country. But when I was like 17, I moved to Toronto, which is the closest to a big city that we have here. I got involved in the comedy scene and writing for a lot of like live sketch comedy for quite some time. I wrote for, a bunch of web series and websites, a few episodes of some children's television shows. And then I had a number of things that didn't quite, a number of unsold screenplays, pilots, etc. When COVID happened, I was visiting my parents out back in Nova Scotia, and I wound up that visit wound up, being about a 6-year thing, and I bought a house out here, and I'm all good now. But yeah, so I wrote a lot before writing this book. When it seemed like there was never going to be anything ever filmed or put on stage again, it was like a book is kind of like where to funnel that energy, and so that's where that started. But yeah, I've been writing a long time.
As I say, that's quite an impressive CV there of your writing over the years.
Thank you for saying so. Yeah, not everybody would agree with you, but I appreciate it.
Bryn, where did you get the idea to write this book? How did that little concept come into your mind to start with?
Well, like I said, I was visiting my parents, and it turned into living with them kind of unexpectedly because of the pandemic. The airline shut down. There didn't seem to be any point in going back to my tiny apartment with my roommate when I could have, a whole house to live in out
Hotel
here.
Mama.
Exactly. Where I live in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, is a very picturesque old fishing village. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a big tourist destination, and there is a history of shipbuilding and just walking around. It's a very inspirational place to be, and I feel like everybody kind of wants to write their book about growing up. And I didn't want to just do that. I wanted to do something a bit more interesting, a bit more fun. My original idea was about rum running and prohibition, and then I kind of morphed into there's a boat in our town called the Bluenose, which was for a time the fastest boat in the world, and it's like a big part of our whole thing, in the way that Old Faithful is a big thing for Yosemite National Park or whatever. So I was like, what if some teenagers stole this boat? Was kind of the genesis of the idea, and then from there it turned into this whole wacky world of it's a historical fiction book, so it's based on the heyday of shipbuilding here, and when the Bluenose was a big going concern, which was in the 1920s, and it just kind of snowballed from there, and then it became, a lot of stuff I wanted to write about kind of came together into this wacky historical boat stealing book.
How did you go about the research? Because it seems if you live in a wonderful part of the world, this boat is sitting there and it sort of sparked your imagination. But there must have
Mm.
been a lot of research for the historical. The fact that it's a burglary as well, I guess you were talking to the police, were you?
No, the research for this was in high school in town. It was mandatory to take a class about the history of the town. And so I had that in my mind. That's where a lot of that stuff came from. And I've worked as a tour guide in town before when I was younger. So there was a lot of that. As far as the burglary aspect was concerned, my original concept was to have just like two best friends steal the boat. And then I spoke to some people and I was like, how many people would it take to actually sail this boat? And they were like 20. And I was like, okay, well, I need to come up with a few more characters. But that was a lot of the research was just like talking to people who I know who like work at sea and being like, would this happen? Could that happen? And then as far as the historical part of it is concerned, there's no accuracy to it, so I wasn't worried about it. There's a mermaid in one part. There's like a bunch of crazy stuff that happens. It's not. I wasn't worried about. Oh, this actually happened in 1925, so that wouldn't have been the case in 1922.
I mean, from what you've just said, the opportunity to speak to people who knew some of the history on the boat and some of sort of the technical aspect, that must have been really interesting.
Everybody here knows the history of town, and like local historians are and certainly in no short supply here. And I had learned a lot about it from I was a tour guide at the church in town. My brother did walking tours of the town here. And then as far as people who work on boats, like a couple good friends of mine are currently in the Coast Guard, and a lot of people I know just go out on fishing voyages here and there. So there's a lot of people around who are still involved in that life to some degree or another. And then the rest is just, fun to make fun of old timey stuff.
So let's talk about some of the characters in the book then. Who are the main characters?
The main characters are two teenage boys in Lunenburg, and they are a fiddler and a tin flute player. They've formed a little band called Jig Talica, which is a thrash fiddle band, which is sort of like the 1920s Nova Scotian equivalent of thrash metal. One of them's more into the band than the other one, but they both love to make music. They're a Lennon-McCartney type duo, I guess you could say. And one of them, his dad is the captain of the Bluenose. The other one, his dad has just died, and so he needs to go out to sea to make money to support his family. But this means he won't be able to tour with his band anymore. And so he abandons ship on his first fishing voyage because there's a radio host in Lunenburg reporting on the Bluenose's recent big victory in the Fisherman's Cup race. And so he decides that if him and his bandmate can get this radio host in a room, she'll for sure sign them to a record deal and put them on the radio, and then all his problems will be solved. But she says the only way she'll do it is if they show her the Bluenose and give her a ride on it. And so therefore they have to get their friends together and steal it.
Oh, cool. I love this. So what genre would you say your book is in? You're saying it's not sort of factually correct. The historians would have a bit of a high day with looking at this.
Well, I would say it's comedy. There's not a lot of comedy fiction books out there. There's a lot of short stories, but not a lot of comedy novels, which there should be. But yeah, it's a comedy novel first and foremost, although there's not really a shelf for that in any bookstore. So it's kind of getting slotted in as historical fiction. People are saying romance as well, but I don't quite agree with that. But
so what about some of the local people? Would they see themselves maybe a little bit in that book?
yeah, there's been a good mix of local responses. There's definitely people in town who are based on certain people in the book are based on amalgams of certain people. A big part of the book is that there's a rival town called Lockport who's evil, and that their mayor is trying to steal the Bluenose as well to make his town the biggest tourist town in Nova Scotia instead of Lunenburg. And people who actually live in Lockport today have been very upset. They've written some pretty nasty reviews, and apparently there's some Facebook groups that are really calling for my head down there. But I haven't gone down there to do any readings yet, but I've heard that they're very upset. But people in Lunenburg have loved it. It's selling really well in this area, and Indigo is Canada's biggest book selling chain, and it named it one of the best regional books of 2025. So then that was based on all the the managers of the Nova Scotia locations voting. Nova Scotia book people are loving it, except for the people in that one town. If you call a small town evil, they're going to be upset.
So, Bryn, let's talk about the writing process. They always say everybody's got a book inside them. That may be true, but there's an awful lot of us, including me, who have got no intention whatsoever. Pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, it's never going to happen. What was it like for you, the writing process?
I've always had some kind of a writing process on the go, like I've always done different types. This is the first time I've done a book, but I've liked to work with other people a lot of the time. I've done a lot of collaborative stuff. I was in a comedy duo for a long time. I've written several screenplays and made some short films with the writing partner. This is my first time sitting down and doing it myself. The process for me is like if I think that it's really funny and I think I want to tell people this like funny story in my mind, I don't want to just throw it out there. It makes me want to sit and make sure that I've got it all perfect before I show it to people. And that kind of really drives me quite a bit. And I think it's just process. Like it's very ramshackle for me. It was like I read some books about like how to properly plot a novel, and then I kind of plugged my own jokes and ideas in there. Like I said, I'd written for kids TV, and I'd written for like live crowds who were usually quite intoxicated. So I know how to like write things that are short, easy to follow, and then in and out for short attention spans. And I think that helped me write it, because I was like, okay, this chapter, if all the chapters are short, it's much easier to sit down, bang a rough draft of one out in a day, and then move on to the next. I guess for me, the writing process is like each one had to be silly. Each one had to have a funny part to it, like something that people could kind of latch onto as their own little thing. So it's like if you like writing jokes and you like coming up with funny stories, then this was my process. It's such a big question. I'm not sure how to answer what was my process like, because it changed day to day. First, it was just sitting around coming up with ideas. Then it was, a big part of it was not being allowed to go out to do stuff. And then when the pandemic ended and I was like doing it for myself, it was like, I had broken up with somebody, just was sitting at home, just needing something to keep me going other than, just there were no good video games out that year. It was just the process really was just taking a bit of time every day to work on it. And the further it went along, the easier that became. It's starting is very hard, but like once you're in it, it's like, well, I know what my job is for the day. I know that I wrote this much yesterday. I need to get to this point today. Is any of this boring? Is this making sense?
When I've spoken to some other authors, they've said compared to writing the book is easy. Trying to get it edited and published and going through that process, that's where it gets really hard, which I always think is really interesting, because I never think writing a book is easy, but they say, oh, well, that is so much easier than trying to get edit after edit after edit and publishing. What was it like for you? I mean, you are a seasoned writer in lots of different genres.
I edited a lot. I am a pretty like harsh critic, and I like editing. So the first edit was not hard. Finding a publisher was hard. I wound up with a pretty small kind of mom and pop outfit that just does local Nova Scotia books. And then they did their round of edits, which was very minimal. We had disagreements about like what we wanted it to look like. So I wound up hiring a childhood friend of mine to do the cover, which I'm very happy I did. But as far as finding it took about another year of trying to find a publisher, and then finally came across these guys. They're such a small outfit that if I would have self-published it, I don't know that it would have made that much of a difference. But It wasn't easy, but I would say it wasn't as fun as writing. I wouldn't say that it was harder per se, but it certainly was not. I didn't wake up every day jazzed to like send emails to these guys. I'll say that, but in the same way that I woke up excited to write.
So you said it took a year to find a publisher. How long did it take you to actually write the book, more or less?
On and off, it was a couple of years. I started it during the pandemic, and then when the pandemic ended, I kind of put it on the shelf for almost a year or so. And then what happened was a local, like I really got serious when there was a local publisher that said they were open for submissions. A pretty big Nova Scotia, as far as Nova Scotia publishers are concerned, big. And they wanted the first 50 pages. And they said, we probably won't get back to you for another year. So I thought, I'll polish the first 50 pages, send it in, and then cram for the next year. That'll give me motivation to get it done. And then they got back to me within a month, and then we're like, where's the rest? And I was like, oh, I'm just editing that now. And so then I kind of crammed for about a year and finished it and sent it to them. And they're like, okay, well, we've moved on. Like, we're not really, we weren't holding a slot for you for a whole year, dude. That motivated me to finish it faster. Although it kind of burned a bridge with the best publisher in town.
So now the book is finished. Does the book look and feel like the book you started sort of 2 years ago? Or has it had a complete rebirthing?
I like it a lot. There's the differences I would say were all from me as I was writing it. The first draft was considerably more violent, I guess, than it wound up being. There was a much more of a hard edge for the first while, and then as I was getting to the end of the first draft, I was like, I don't want to kill these characters off. They're nice. Or like there was a certain hard edge that I really polished off. I kind of softened up in the rewrite process, not because of any like external pressure, but just because I was like, this is actually a much sweeter, kinder story than I was thinking at the in the darkest days of COVID. I was like very happy to like throw all this angst on the page, but then the biggest difference I would say from concept to execution was I personally, just as I softened as a person, I guess, and also was like, this kind of anger doesn't fit the story as much as I thought that it did. So I think it's better than I would. I think if the like angry book I had put out in my head made it to the end, I think it would be. I don't think anyone would like it.
So you've both softened up a bit over the writing process then?
Yeah, because at the end it really was. There was a number of villain characters at the end. When I got to the part where I was supposed to write their deaths, I was like, I don't want to do that.
So when did the book actually come out, Bryn?
Came out in June of 2025.
So it's been out for just under a year now. Are you working on something else now?
Yeah, I'm working on another book now, and then I'm also I'm personally working on the audio version of this one. Again, it's a very tiny publisher, so there was no budget to do that. But I'm partnering up with a Canadian record label to do the audio version, which has been a daunting process because it's essentially taking this book, which I spent years writing, and now I've got to turn it into like a 10-hour one-man show, essentially, and do all the voices and stuff. So that's been occupying my time getting that ready, and then I'm working on another book, and then I've got a short film that I co-wrote is currently making the rounds at film festivals. That's doing quite well too. So I'm working on with the guy who directed that. He and I are working on a feature version of the short screenplay.
Wow, so you're not sitting there twiddling your fingers going, what's next then? My God.
I'm the busiest man in the middle of nowhere.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. So, Bryn, where can people find out about you? Where can they get your book? Where can they see what you're doing in the film world as well?
You can go to my website, brynpottie.com. I'm on Instagram at Bryn Pottie. You can buy
Yeah.
the book from my website. It depends on what country you're in. If you're in Canada, Indigo is the way to go. United States, like you can get it on Amazon. Your favorite bookstore should be able to order it in for you.
The book is going down really well where you are. I love the fact that
Hmm.
some of the local characters are in it. And boy, you're busy doing the film, you're doing the audio book, you've got some other writing projects as well.
I'm in full midlife crisis mode over here.
I love that. Anything you want to add about the book before we finish?
If you don't read a lot of books, this you are my target audience here. I really tried to write this book to be. It's a good bathroom book. It's a good just a chapter here and there before bed. You can pick it up, put it down whenever you like. If you've only read a handful of books since high school, take a chance on it. I think you'll find it a bit more fun than you remember reading books could be.
That's really cool. I love that because there are a lot of people who are not big readers. You know, they might do two or three books a year because that's their attention span, or they just can't fit it into their life, or they're just not in general good at doing a lot of reading. Other people would devour books in a few days. But it's really interesting that you have said that type of person who is not a real bookworm is your target audience. That's really refreshing to hear. I like that.
I go through phases where I don't read very much, I and then I go through phases where I read a lot. And what always gets me back into reading is like a quick, easy book that I'm like, well, that was fun. I can do this. And then I'll try something a bit more with a bit more substance. But this is a great little quick thing for a lapsed reader who may not, maybe doesn't want to pick up Moby Dick right away. This might be a nice little refresher on why reading can be fun. And if you like stuff like The Simpsons or Naked Gun or like just silly broad comedy, then this is for you. And I don't think there's very little of that in books right now.
Well, Bryn, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I really hope when your second book is ready to be released in the wild, you get back in touch with me and say, hey, Sheila, I've got another book. Let's do this again, because I would love that.
I'll be on the first flight to Spain as soon as it's
Well, that would be great. We would love to welcome you. So, Bryn, we're going to put all the links to your website, to your book, everything that we can get, we'll put with the podcast. Bryn, I'm just really, really enjoyed our conversation. And I really, really hope that this second book and anything else you're working on goes forward to have great success. You're a really nice guy and you deserve it.
Well, thank you so much, and it's been a lot of fun to be here on the podcast, and I'm happy that we made this work. So thank you so much, and I hope that you. I didn't ask you a single thing about yourself. I feel very rude about it, but I
No,
hope
no,
that.
that's fine, Bryn, because the title of the podcast, it's all about you. You do the heavy lifting, not me.
Okay, fair enough. Next time we'll flip the script.
Bryn, thank you so much for our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my conversation, Bryn. I really hope you enjoyed it. What a guy! I think he's really cool, and I love the fact that he has written about his own hometown, small though it may be, but obviously bringing a bit of the history and a bit of sort of fantasy as well. Absolutely love that. So thank you for listening, and please subscribe for future episodes on whatever platform you are listening to. And please share this podcast. And if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.